For those that are joining us, hello and welcome. My name is Liesl. I am the founder of the Conspiracy of Goodness Network. Joining us this evening is Dr. Lynda Ulrich, who is the founder of Ever Widening Circles, the sort of parent organization to the Conspiracy of Goodness Network, and also my parents, my mom. So some light nepotism here, but it's always good. She's going to be speaking with us for about 30 minutes, and then we will have time for Q&A after her presentation. So if you have questions along the way, please pop them over in the chat. Our teammate Ellen is over there fielding questions that I'll be then asking Dr. Lynda, and we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes at the end. Our hope is that we get you out by 7 o'clock Eastern here, so that you can go on with your evenings or your days, wherever you're joining us from. So why don't we get started? Dr. Lynda, as I mentioned, is the founder of Ever Widening Circles. It's a global endeavor that has become a large media organization that's on a mission to change the negative dialogue about our times. She, along with being my mom, has been a dentist for the past 30 years, and it's that compassion and that drive to bring people along with her in this understanding the world is still a wonderful place that led to the initial sort of conception of Ever Widening Circles as we know it today. And along the way, over the course of almost a decade, searching the internet and figuring out how it really works, she has learned a lot about how we can change what we're seeing in our online lives so that we're not only having a better online life, but our life offline is changed fundamentally as well. So with that, I will give you that opener. Mom, I will let you take the floor to explain how we start to really change our online lives and our lives as just in general.
So thank you, Liesl, for that nice introduction. I know it's probably a leap in your way of thinking to consider that I went from dentist to global media interests. But it all comes back to something that Liesl mentioned, and probably the reason why everyone's here is because we're concerned about our shared humanity and what is happening to that with this pressure from our lives online. So I began this journey because I have a dental practice where I really deeply connect with others. I make sure that every single patient comes. Liesl's dad is a dentist too, and we built for 30 years a practice where we found something to celebrate with every single person. And that led me to really notice how much harder and harder that got through the years 2010, 11, 12. I mean, we think the news is all negative now, and that our online lives are bombarding us with nothing but fear. But it was starting then, and I started to notice my patients easily slipping into a lot of future fatalism, a sense that the future was getting darker. So here we are, and that this journey began with me going on a search of the internet for a wonderful place full of light and insight and innovation that I could refer a patient to, a young patient who was very depressed. When I couldn't find it, I invented it. And here we are. It was just a passion project in the beginning, but I have learned so much in the last 8.5 years. And Liesl came along on the journey when she graduated from college, and then we were off and running. The passion project turned to a real serious endeavor to change the negative dialogue about our times. So that's a little bit of the journey. And what I'm going to share with you tonight is what I learned on this intense arc of time, going from ordinary web user to where I am now, leading this team to dispel the notions that the future is all bleak, because it is not. There is so much to be excited about in the future. And what's happening with our online lives is that there are two major pressures that are not allowing to see that version of reality. One is our algorithms, which I'm going to go deep into about how we can actually just totally master those. And the second is that the internet has become an attention economy. It just is. Nothing else matters but getting and holding our attention. You know, sometimes I think that that it's like trying to think straight in a room with the fire alarm going on. If you go to social media and you just allow things to come at you randomly, and you aren't aware of these connections and your ability to shape what your algorithm sends you, it really is a time that that we can use as a aha moment. That's one of the first things I want everybody to recognize is that we've done hard things before. There is not one single human invention that wasn't reimagined after a couple decades. You can take the steam engine, the cotton gin, the printing press. They were human constructs, just like the internet. The internet is no different. And after a period of time, we said, whoa, 750,000 12-year-olds are at sewing machines 12 hours a day during the Industrial Revolution. There was a point in time where people realized it was going the wrong way and they reimagined what was possible. And we're there with the internet. I don't believe there was any evil geniuses at the beginning. There was 130 websites in 1993. And by 2003, there were 40 million. And what happened was an organizing principle had to come to the top. And in all that chaos, it became our attention. What we give our attention to somehow equated with merit. And of course, we know that that's not the way it is. And then people began to learn that they could use neuroscience to hijack our attention. One of the first things I want you to understand is that if you go to the internet on autopilot, which is what's happening when you're just scrolling and clicking and scrolling and clicking at lunch, we are all hardwired to look for signs of danger and disorder. And you won't even realize that that's what your brain is doing when you're scrolling and clicking randomly just in and out of things for a millisecond. So in your mind, all this danger and disorder builds up to a notion that you have about reality. But here's the first good news. What you see on the internet is only a slice of reality. And that's what Liesl and the team at Ever Widening Circles has been proving for all these years, is that there's this whole world of goodness and progress going on that almost no one knows about. Not because it's not important or because it's not plentiful. It's just not rising to the top of the internet. And hopefully what we do in the next few minutes will help you change that for yourself. So, so we're due for an upgrade of the internet. Okay, maybe it will happen in a broader picture, but you can do it starting today, starting right this minute. I've had people tell me after they've heard the comments I'm going to give you that I've sort of, for a time, I ruined their lunch hour because they could no longer just randomly scroll and click and scroll and click. They knew too much. So eventually, though, within a few weeks, you're going to see that this knowing more about the secrets of the internet fundamentally improves what you see on the screens in your life. So let's get to it. Okay. First, just know that what we've been living in since pretty much the age of the radio, the TV, and the internet is what I call the attention economy. Everything about our economy is about getting and holding our attention. It's about interruption. And as we mentioned a minute ago, our brains are tuned to look for signs of danger and disorder. So that's what we're going to do whenever we're on autopilot. When we're reading a magazine, the newspaper, watching the news at night, if you're on autopilot, you're going to see things that your brain is tuned to pick up. And that was a really life-saving feature of our brain for hundreds of thousands of years. But we don't have too many saber-toothed tigers anymore wandering around. So we don't need to be listening for a twig snap. What we do need to be doing is paying attention to what we're giving our attention to. So if you want to just take a few notes, that's the first thing to say to yourself. Make a practice, maybe tomorrow. You just pay attention to what you're paying attention to, because that's the whole game. There's the old part of our brain called the amygdala, that some scientists even call it the lizard brain because it's so primitive. And that part of our brain is always watchful. for these signs of danger and disorder, and it's what's responsible for the fight or flight. Well, that's going to be on all the time unless you shift up to the newer part of your brain called your cerebral cortex. And that's the part of your brain that can make really savvy decisions, that can look at a social media posting and say, they're just trying to get me to click on that. And that's the part of your brain that can refuse about 80% of the chaos that's being put on the internet just to capture and hold our attention. So there are 4 shifts that you can do to fundamentally teach your algorithms what you want to see next. And that's kind of let me give you a little overview of the algorithm situation. I've really looked at this hard. And there are many complex ways to think about the algorithm, but essentially what it was a shortcut. When people first invented algorithms, it was meant to be helpful. It was meant to be a shortcut so that the internet served you what you really wanted much quicker without searching and searching and searching. So good intention turned out to be where we are today. But every click you make is teaching your algorithms what you want to see next. So if you give your attention to that crazy mean posting on social media or some dreadful headline in the news, your algorithm is going to think that's what you want to see next. So let's talk about the 4 shifts that I teach people that'll help you train your algorithms in a whole new direction. Okay, so the first shift you can do is to pause. It's super simple. Before you click on anything on the internet, pause. And remember that someone is counting every single click you make. Your click is a vote. Because everything you clicked on, you're going to get more of. That's the way the algorithms work. And I know that sounds super scary, but if you practice the second shift, it's going to be super empowering. Because once you pause before you click on things, you can ignore more. And here's a really nice trick about this ignoring more. What I learned to do, and at first, it's a chore like learning any new skill, but I learned to ask myself, do we need more of that? So this pausing long enough for a millisecond to say, wait, before I click on that, do we need more of that? Is such a great skill. And if you put most things on social media through that lens, you will ignore about 80% of what you used to click on. The thing is that at least 80% of the content on the internet is made to get us to, on autopilot, give it our attention. And here's the secret of the internet that I was astounded by. Every single piece of content on the internet is rewarded simply by us clicking on it. It's not how long we stay there. In fact, the internet now is trained to recognize, especially on social media, how long our eyes linger on something. How long when we're scrolling, how we might slow down for a certain thing. And that gives any kind of internet content what I call link juice. It gets it to rise farther and further to the top. So the first shift is to pause. The second shift is to ignore more. And you can use that little trick I gave you. I look at the thing I might be curious about clicking into and I say, do we need more of this? And I'll answer no almost all the time. This is things like the blobfish picture. Do we need more of that? A headline that might say, 2 death ships parked in Miami Harbor. Do we need more of that? You can really look at the content that's on your feed. Let's say it's content that sort of offends you at your core politically, or it's something that is on your team, it's for your side politically, but it's just plain mean-spirited, or it offends someone's dignity. You can still ask yourself that question and sort of say, no, we don't really need more of that. We can fundamentally ignore things into obscurity. And once we do that, We can practice the third shift, and that's seek signs of goodness and progress, because your algorithms are paying attention to what you seek. One side of the algorithm is watching what you've clicked on last, and the next is asking what you're asking for. So if you seek signs of goodness and progress, there are no end to the places on the internet that are responsibly providing internet content at ever widening circles. We just won't touch anything with a 10-foot pole that has politics. Um, we have people that are super, super conservative politically and super liberal uh, politically, and they find that we make them feel uplifted both. And that's not impossible. There are certain topics in this world, certain wonders that can bring a smile to almost everyone. So it can be done. I'm going to go into some practical tips about how to know who to trust in a few minutes, but just sticking with the 4 shifts. The first one is pause. The second one is ignore more. The third one is seek signs of goodness and progress. So if your algorithm sees you going to places that deal with something that makes your heart soar. Let's say you love Brittany Spaniels, or you're a horse person, or you love Asian cooking, or you're just naturally curious. So you go to places like Ever Widening Circles, or the NASA channel, or the Smithsonian channel. Your algorithm picks that up, and you will see more and more and more of that in your feed. Then the 4th shift is share signs of goodness and progress. And that part is, it's one of the best things you can do for the greater good, because content creators are so focused on what we share. That's a little tip I'll share with you that I learned. When you're on Facebook and you see a posting about your neighbor kid, and he apparently raised $400 for the local humane society, don't just like that post. Move your finger over 1 inch and share it, because that is truly remarkable. And what happens with the internet is a like means almost nothing, but a share can go out in waves to thousands of people. And what we share is the world we're going to get more of. And that's really important, because it makes us stop and kind of use the noggin here. That sword can cut both ways. If you share only a certain political view, or a certain religious view, or certain view of reality, that can turn out to be negative. So when I talk about this, what we share, make sure we go back to that sentence. Do we all need more of this? Where's the greater good here? And we can shape the future by thinking about what we share in the context of the greater good. So those are the 4 shifts. If you start practicing that religiously, at first it takes some effort, because we've all gotten in the habit of just this scrolling and clicking and scrolling and clicking. But once you start practicing it, it's going to be something your mind does automatically. It shifts up to the savvier part of your brain. Now you're going to know the game being played with your emotions. And it really is that. If any of you have seen the documentary, the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I have a book called Happiness is an Option that published about 9 days before the Social Dilemma came out. And we all kind of chewed our nails there for those 9 days, because I was simply sharing my observations about how the internet works after 8 years. And that Netflix documentary could have contradicted what I was saying, but it fell right into revealing the inner workings of the internet as we now all experience it. And but what they didn't do was give us a plan. That is the problem with the Netflix documentary. You go through the whole thing, and it's really valuable to learn everything that's gone on and how we got here. It's not scary. It's not more doom and gloom. I don't know. Lisa can add a thought or two about the Netflix documentary, but I found it to be exactly the right medicine for our times, because now we've got some logic. It makes sense. The people who created the algorithms and the search boxes and the like button and all that stuff, they were ordinary people like all of us who had good intention. And then it was a runaway train with every single innovation. And it's clear in the documentary, they couldn't possibly be that good actors. They all feel very badly about where their innovations went. And here we are. But the plan I just gave you will help you move away from all that manipulation and see a world full of possibility, full of the things that make your heart soar. So I want to leave you this part of our chat with just a few really practical tips, kind of like the asking yourself, do we need more of this? Not do I need more of this, but do we all need more of this? Here's another way to navigate the internet with a little clarity. Never click in A, B, or C mode. Never click in A, B, C mode. And A stands for anger, B stands for boredom, and C stands for curiosity. I'm not talking about regular curiosity. I'm a biggest fan in the world of curiosity, but you know that morbid curiosity where you might see, some horrifying picture of a tornado disaster or what have you. Never click out of morbid curiosity, not anger, boredom, or morbid curiosity. And if you eliminate those three impulses from what gets your attention, the world you see on the internet will change dramatically. The anger thing is part of our self-protection thing. We've got something called a self map inside our mind of who we are, and it's the values we represent and others. And it's really easy for people to get at our self map. And then it makes us angry and we want to fight back. But here's what actually happens. If you see a social media posting and you take the time to write the savviest retort in the world, what actually happened is you just gave that mean posting a vote. You gave it link juice. And then you know what's going to happen? About 10, 20, 50, 100 people on the other side who liked that mean post are going to dive in and just tear you to shreds. So not only did you give the mean post your own vote, but you just caused it to get all that link juice from the hundreds of other people. So no matter how bad that social media dreadful thing is, and I know I've been a slave to justice all my life, but I know the game being played with my emotion on the internet, and I will not play it. So if we can ignore the mean people, that's the quickest way to put their work into obscurity. That's the anger. Do not click out of anger. The boredom, go to the internet with intention. If you want to see my sister's building a new porch, it's a great deal in her life, and I wanted to see this recent picture. I go to the internet Facebook page with intention. I'm going to see my sister's porch, and then I'm going to go away and live my real life. This is the thing. Before there was an internet, we lived our lives. And that life is still there, and it's still full of doing amazing things with your family and advancing the hobbies that make your heart soar. The greatest trap that we have that's regrettable is allowing the internet to suck our time away from this real life that could be so beautiful and have so much potential. So boredom, go to the internet with purpose and then leave. And that morbid curiosity thing, that's the easiest. When people are playing that game, when they show some gross picture or some, a picture of an anaconda snake with a human form in it. No, don't click on it. And I'll tell you, there's enough people out there who navigate the internet like I just described, and they'll tell you. I had a friend, after she read my book, she sent me a nice message and she said, Lynda, I've been having trouble explaining to people that I don't see the terrible world they see on the internet. She says, all I care about in this world is Brittany Spaniel and cooking. And that's all she ever clicked on, and that's all she ever saw. Well, that world is available to us all. I don't know if we any of us want it to be that narrow, but maybe we do. I could have about 10 different things that I'm curious about that show up in my feed. Um, so those are some practical tips about this. We have a really nice 10-minute read about the 4 shifts. If you want to dive into that or share it with someone, Liesl can tell you how you can get that. And then the book is always there. I've had so much nice response to that, and it's on Amazon, and I just recorded the audiobook and it's up now, so that's something that I know would give you a lot of peace of mind. So let's open it up to questions.
Probably should unmute myself before I ask questions. Thank you so much, Mom. Every time I hear this, I'm reminded, it's a good reminder for myself, sort of as maybe practice what you preach, but always, I think to myself, what am I seeing more of on my feeds these days? It's a good reminder to check in with what I've been clicking on recently. I guess one of the questions that I have, and then we can open it up to other questions from the floor as well, is, what is the impact? We talk a lot about our digital lives and our real lives. What is the impact of changing what we see online? I don't think we necessarily think about how what we're seeing online can have an impact outside of the online world.
Yeah. So I think what the internet is doing to our personal and our working lives is huge. It's setting the background for our thoughts going forward. If all you see is scary things on your newsfeed, or other people seeming despicable, and you're trying to raise a sane 14-year-old boy, there's just no way you're going, or if you're a teacher, or if you're someone who works in the service of others, there's no way you're going to be able to counsel your kids about finding a bright future, about taking a little risk, about going out there and loving others and all that. There's just no way. If the backdrop, if the context that you're getting is provided by our online lives in this random way that's just almost nothing but danger and disorder, there's no way you're going to give good counsel to your kids. The same is in your business and working life. You're not going to take the appropriate level of risk as a business person. You're not going to push yourself as far as you would if you believed that the world was a wonderful place and it was full of possibility and opportunity. This narrative that this slice of reality is leaving in our mind's eye about all that's possible or all that's impossible is really quite limiting when you think about your own potential. So this is why we must see Daniel Kish. He's an innovator who had no eyes. he had cancer when he was an infant, and he sees with sound. Daniel has traveled here and stayed with us for days. I'm a welder. Now, this gentleman has 2 glass eyes, so he absolutely cannot see. And yet, he was out in the welding shop with me welding. He knew where to put the spark and the welder, because he clicks. He makes a clicking sound, and that echoes back at his brain, and his brain creates mental pictures of the world around him. Now, being with Daniel Kish and knowing his story from Ever Widening Circles makes me think, what am I capable of between my ears? So the sense of possibility and looking for opportunities around you that you'd never otherwise notice is heightened by knowing about others who are living in this state of possibility.
I love that. I think that so often we forget that we need to be inspired ourselves, in order to, keep our, the metaphor, you got to keep your glass full in order to serve others or in order to do good in the world. And so I think it's really important. This is such a wonderful reminder, that this is a part of that understanding possibility and not being, so pulled into the negativity of the internet allows us to live more full lives off of the internet, more full lives with our families, with our friends, with our colleagues, with, make better business decisions. So I think this is a key point for us to remember, that
Mhm.
our online lives are no longer separated from all of the other part
Oh,
of who
no,
we are. Yeah.
no.
One of the questions. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's setting the context for everything we think and do outside
Hmm.
our online lives, and then we're constantly going back to our phones. I have to just share with you a great story, but it's so true. I was visiting my sister, and she has an 18-year-old daughter. We were sitting at dinner, and we kind of got to marveling or giggling a little bit about these conspiracy theories that say that the vaccine is putting a chip in us. And my 18-year-old niece, she just held up her phone and she went, "Oh, almost everybody's already being dominated by a chip." I mean, this was wonderful to hear from an 18-year-old that she has that realization. But that is the bottom line, is that we get to decide what to give our attention to.
Hmm.
And once we realize that about the internet, it becomes, we have all the power there. That's the bottom line, is that once we realize that what we see, we can determine because of this way that the algorithms are built, then we become the authors of our own reality. We get to decide what our worldview looks like.
So Ellen has a question. She says, Dr. Lynda, what sources do you go to first when you're seeking goodness in the world? Of course, other than ever widening circles, which is always our sort of number one,
Hmm.
because we're curating so much of the good stuff that's out there.
Hmm. So, um, I guess I couldn't answer that question. I would sound very rose-colored glasses if I didn't indicate that I do know about what's happening in the world with the news. So I have only two ways that I engage in the news. I have a 12-minute drive to work to my dental practice, and I go on National Public Radio for that in that part of the morning. And I get a New York Times daily briefing, which takes me about 6 minutes. I've kind of figured out how much time I'm willing to give my attention to the news. And then on the way home for 12 minutes, I listen to the BBC International News. So I know what's happening. And I figure anything that doesn't make my radar screen from those three sources, NPR, the BBC International News, and the New York Times Daily Briefing, I can probably I'll probably stumble upon it if I need it, but that keeps me aware of the world around me. I don't really believe it's useful to tune out all the news, because again, back to making good decisions in business or counseling our children in a thoughtful way, you got to know what's happening to the outside world at some level. But outside of that, exit. Just get what you need to know and exit, and incorporate it in the way you're thinking, but leave room for places like TechCrunch. TechCrunch is a great place to go if you just want. If you just want to go, what? This is happening. Talk about affecting your business life and your the way you would talk to young people. TechCrunch is a great place. Lisa will help me here. I particularly have fallen in love with documentaries, streaming documentaries that are thoughtful and helpful. Like, I have been just lately really diving deep into the arc of human civilization. There's just no end to the really well-made documentaries about how we made it here as a species. I follow my passions in the arts. There's lots and lots of documentaries that dive deep into what makes people tick and what makes a human artist. I love to read. I have been biographies of all sorts. So, but these are things, some of them are online and some of them are things I actively seek. I seek signs of goodness and progress. What would you come up with to answer that question, Liesel?
Yeah, I think two things that I'm noticing, because I do think the internet understands that this is a problem, and I say internet in general, meaning different social media platforms. But I've noticed that if I've started down a good rabbit hole, let's say what I click on Facebook, right? I click on Nas Daily. He goes around the world and talks about wonderful things in the world. I'm starting to be fed more and more things like Nas Daily, more
Mm,
positive online content creators. YouTube gets a lot of flack for the terrible rabbit holes it can lead people down. People who are very lonely and very vulnerable, it can lead them down these terrible rabbit holes, but it can also lead you to great places. If you follow TED Ed, that's one of our favorites. TED Ed, Smithsonian, Discovery, Seeker. There's a lot of incredible, I mean, just beautiful science content creators. Veritas.
Yes.
That if you're following them on YouTube and you're watching more and more of them, I'm also just like a big cooking nerd, so I follow a lot of what Sola Whaley does. Like the more you get into those things, the more that YouTube and others will feed you. So when you go out and seek signs of progress, it's kind of hard in the beginning, and I think you start with the things that you know bring joy to your life, and will be positive, just generally good and positive. Don't start trying to find good news is my recommendation, because good news is something that we can incorporate into our lives. But start with the things that are that make you passionate and curious, and you'll start to see your algorithms start to change and start to become more positive. So I would say that's what I would suggest is, there are lots of sources for goodness, and they tend to be very niche. I find this as well. And so the more that you dig into those interesting positive niches that fulfill your life, the more that you'll start to get served those, whether that's Instagrammers, TikToks, or YouTube, or Facebook. That and I would suggest, let's say you've gone on an adventure to follow all the Instagrammers you could possibly follow under a certain thing. If you're noticing that those Instagrammers stories or posts are making you feel negative or making you feel bad, it's okay to unfollow. Like, content creators, we know it is really hard to get people to care. And we want to support people, but if we're finding that we're feeling more negative from the media we're consuming, don't continue consuming. It's okay to unfollow in order to seek, and you can always come back to them if you're in a different headspace in future. But that's what I would suggest, is use the algorithms to your benefit in some ways.
That brings something up that I would not want to get this have this session go by without mentioning. It's easy to sort of think, oh, this is, it's too big. We can't fix the internet. Not enough goodness can rise to the top, no matter how many of us get on board with this. But that's not true. I remember a really dark day in the ever widening circles journey when I was kind of like, oh, am I alone out here, and recognize that we got a problem? It was years ago, but just in the nick of time, I happened to dive over to LinkedIn. I don't know why, because at that point I was never going to LinkedIn, but I did. And serendipity brought me a number that I hope will comfort everyone that's listening. So if you ask me, is there any chance we can reimagine the role of the internet in our lives going forward, and in our children's lives, and in our nieces and nephews, especially if we can't fix it for ourselves? Is there a future for the internet that could be positive? And the answer is yes. Here's a number that we can all get excited about. The World Economic Forum did a study where they looked at what it takes, how many people it takes to make something go from the fringes of society to being just the way it's done. And so, for instance, if we all decided, like Liesl said, to start unfollowing the chaos builders, the people that are not moving us forward as individuals and as a greater society. If we all stop doing that, would it take all of us to make the internet change, or to make these chaos builders change? Actually, no. The number turns out to be 25%. It would only take 25% of people to know about the 4 shifts, pause, ignore more, seek signs of goodness, and share it. If just 25% of us knew those 4 things, and we practiced them on the internet would change almost overnight. No one's producing content if we don't click on it. So this study found that after 25%, there's all this neuroscience that kicks in, and then people fall into line. So I just wanted to give people the reassurance that this is definitely a solo journey. You can change your own algorithms like that if you start training them about what you really want to see in the world. But it's also part of this greater good number if more and more of us figure this out and share it with others.
We have another question here, Mom. And that's, how do we weed out what seems fake or fear enticing? I mean, how do we
Mhm,
weed out our sources to know
mhm.
who is good and who's bad? Or I
You know,
guess
it's
good and bad in relative terms, who is the chaos builder?
yeah, who is the chaos builder? Here's what I think it comes down to. Ask yourself, is this thoughtful and helpful? Because here it is. I can hear hard things. I can hear somebody give me a very, very hard thing to hear about whatever. There's a lot of problems in society. If they're thoughtful and helpful in the way they construct their argument, we can all hear hard things if the person on the other end is thoughtful and helpful. But if we just have a level of negative noise, reactionary, off the cuff noise on the internet, that is not thoughtful and helpful. I don't know about you, Liesl, but my first thoughts are not that good. I have to think about things. I have to type out things and let them sit for 24 hours before I press send. And you can tell who's doing that on the internet. If it looks like people are just firing stuff off, that is an immediate sign that they're not being thoughtful and helpful. So don't give them your attention, and then you won't amplify their message. And there's another thing that I really love to kind of use as a litmus test. What people celebrate defines them. So if you're curious about somebody that you think you might follow or what have you, go see what they celebrate. And if they celebrate other people losing or triumphing, being the triumphant one in some philosophical skirmish, or if they're celebrating negativity, if they post a lot of stuff that's negative, that tells you it's probably not something we all need too. So I'm not sure how you know who's practicing truth, but here's what I do know. Most of us can see and spot good intention a mile away. We're hardwired for that. Back in the caveman days, we had to see somebody on a hillside and determine whether they were going to be a threat or somebody we could trust. And so we actually have parts of our brain that are built to recognize good intention. And converse is true too. If somebody gives you kind of a sick feeling in the pit of your stomach, I had a thought leader tell me that that's how they do it. Today I was recording a podcast and a thought leader told me that. She says, sometimes I'll go on the internet and I'll spend time in somebody's world there. I follow an influencer or whatever, and I come away with kind of a knot in my stomach. And she unfollows. She doesn't know why. There's not a lot of intellect happening there, but she is using the executive function part of her brain and saying, this isn't making me feel better about the future in the world, so she unfollows. So try some of those techniques about really having some self-awareness about how you come away. Here's a really practical one. We had this amazing interview with Julia Parsak. Is that how you pronounce her name, Liesl? Julia's last name?
I am not sure how to pronounce her last name,
Yeah, I
which,
think
as
it's
somebody with a
Parsak.
very complex last name, I should be able to pronounce other
Yeah.
people's last names.
Anyway, Julie and I had this amazing talk, and she is all into body image. And she just says, hey, I figured out I was following all these people on Instagram who are all, Twiggies and constantly talking about how they stay so slim. And that's just what they're focused on. Is this perfect body image? And she said she never felt good after she was visiting them and their feed and had them in her feed. And so unfollow. And she feels world's better. Now she's following people who fit more in her ethos and her value system.
It's so true, and I think Catherine just put something absolutely brilliant in the chat that I'll share for everybody. She says a helpful acronym for me when considering something is THINK, THINK. Is it true, helpful, informative, necessary, and kind? I love that, Catherine. That's absolutely brilliant. So is it true, helpful, informative, necessary, kind? Think. Wow. I love that, Catherine. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I mean, that is
but
really it.
it's lovely. The necessary part is really, really important. Like, could we do without this? Like, what's this for? A lot of that is, yeah. What do we need? What do we want the noise around us to be full of?
Hmm. Oh,
Mhm.
wow. That is so
Yeah,
incredible.
lovely,
Well,
Catherine.
does anybody else have any questions? I just want to we're rounding out here towards 7 o'clock. So if anybody has any last questions, please put them in the chat. And I think we have time for one more, if anybody has any out there.
While we're waiting for people who might want to pop something in, I have a few, just again, more practical tips that come out of this, knowing more about all the possibility in the world once you get on this roll, once you start seeking signs of goodness and progress and ignoring the rest. You're going to be able to navigate bumps in the road better. You're going to be able to change contempt to curiosity. Because once you know more about what's possible, you're going to go, oh, that struck me as terrible. But you're going to go, it's probably just that I don't know enough about this thing. And so changing contempt to curiosity is sort of a natural outcome of paying attention to what you're paying attention to. So that's a really nice thing. And I think as far as the division goes in our world, just discover more. Get curious about others. Give people the benefit of the doubt. Oh, that is such an important thing that somebody came up with the other day on a chat like this that I was having. They said, the people that really used to get under their skin, they don't jump to conclusions so much. Like coworkers and their children, they give the person the benefit of the doubt and get curious first, and that's going to be very, very helpful as we try and navigate the rest of this challenging time.
Well, Mom, Dr. Lynda, thank you so much for joining us and for leading Ever Widening Circles, and which has spawned on the Conspiracy of Goodness and the Conspiracy of Goodness Network. How can people connect with you and your work?
So the one thing I'm really proud of these days is this podcast that we're doing, the Conspiracy of Goodness Network, Goodness podcast. We're all in with the Conspiracy of Goodness. There really is an enormous wave of goodness and progress going on in the world that almost no one knows about. And on the podcast, I've fallen into interviewing people from all kinds of corners that are thought leaders. And what they're doing is they're sharing with me their vision of reality, of the future. What makes them get up every morning, because they can see something that you and I can't see yet. And in the process of doing that, they're sharing all these great coping skills they've learned that drives them forward every day and that allows them to handle challenges with leaps. So we've been having a lot of fun on the podcast. Helpful, very helpful is the book. Happiness is an option. And then I'm pretty proud of my TEDx talk. If people really want to know more about the Conspiracy of Goodness and the 4 shifts, there's a TEDx talk that I did in November called Exposing the Conspiracy of Goodness. It's about 12 minutes. And if you want to share this whole process that you've learned about tonight with somebody else, and the best you can do is get them to commit 12 minutes, that's what you should look for. Exposing the Conspiracy of Goodness. It's Naperville TEDx. And I'm very proud of that.
I've put links to all of those. I've put a link to the Ever Widening Circles podcast. Sorry, I guess now it's formerly Ever Widening Circles, now Conspiracy of Goodness podcast. I have put a link to Lynda's TED Talk, and I am popping a link in there now if you guys want to grab the book on Amazon. It's also on Barnes & Noble if you choose to support them instead.
Liesl, I think it's a good walking book. I had a patient tell me that the other day when the audiobook came out. It's a short book. It takes about 3.5 hours. My reading it took about 3.5 hours. So for me, that's about 3.5 walks.
Perfect. Yes. And announcing excitingly, the audiobook for Happiness is an Option is now up on Audible. So go
Yeah.
check that out if you prefer to listen to your books instead of read them.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much, Mom, Dr. Lynda. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all so much for coming. I will be sending a recording of this along to you guys, as well as a link to our short ebook, the 4 shifts, that goes into a little bit more detail about the 4 shifts. But yes, I think most of you are here from the Conspiracy of Goodness Network and or ever widening circles. Thank you so much for following us. Thanks for being a part of this journey. Thanks for proving that goodness is out there, and for being a part of the Conspiracy of Goodness itself. We hope that you will join us on future events. We are hosting workshops every month with thought leaders like Dr. Lynda. Our May workshop is with an incredible woman named Sheldon Barlett Rumer. She is an incredible person that will help you define who you are, find your voice, and be able to share that voice with other people. So if you have any young business people who are starting their second climb in their life, who are looking to refine their message so they can start to share it with the world and do good with their work, please, please, please let them know about our next workshop. It's going to be absolutely incredible. She and I have been planning it this week, and we hope you can join us then. Until then, you can check us out, obviously, on, we'll be emailing you and on our mailing list over at Ever Widening Circles. You can follow us on Ever Widening Circles on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, whichever social media you prefer. And I want to thank you all for joining us this evening, and thank you, Mom, Dr. Lynda, for joining us as well. We so appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see some of you again next month.
Okay, thank you.